Biogeochemical cycles. Elements and compounds move between living and non-living forms through the biogeochemical cycles. The key cycles that support life are the water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, and phosphorus cycle. The water cycle. Water is essential to living organisms. You can see an image here of what happens in the various parts of the water cycle. You can click this picture to watch a video about the water cycle, but we'll go over it in the following slides. Most water molecules are taken up into the clouds by evaporation and transpiration. So you can see transpiration is the movement through the plants up into the clouds. Evaporation from the surface. The water returns to the oceans, lands, and lakes by precipitation. Water that enters the soil returns through the oceans through runoff. The carbon cycle. As shown in the image, you can see the cycle and click to watch a video. Let's point out the key features in the slides ahead. Carbon is moved through the biosphere in four main ways: photosynthesis, cellular respiration, and decomposition in living organisms take up and release carbon. Geochemical processes like erosion and volcanic activity release CO2 into the atmosphere and the ocean. Burial and decomposition under pressure converts dead organisms into fossil fuels like coal and petroleum, storing carbon underground. Human activities like mining, forest fires, and the burning of fossil fuels release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Most carbon dioxide is found in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is used by plants to form sugars, which are eaten by animals. So you can see here, used in photosynthesis to produce carbohydrates. Plants are eaten by animals. Carbon is recycled to the atmosphere by cellular respiration. And human activities like burning fossil fuels also release carbon into the atmosphere. The nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is found in molecules that are key to photosynthesis, cellular respiration, reproduction, and protein synthesis. Some of these molecules are DNA, RNA, ATP, ADP, NADH, and NADP. You can see an overview of the nitrogen cycle on the screen. On the next slide, we'll look at these steps in some more detail. Most nitrogen is found as a gas in the atmosphere. You can see atmospheric nitrogen here, N2. But this form is unavailable for protein synthesis. Bacteria in the soil make nitrogen compounds from atmospheric nitrogen so that it can be used by plants and animals. This is called nitrogen fixation. So you can see here, nitrogen fixing, we take this atmospheric nitrogen fixing bacteria living in legume root nodules, or nitrogen fixing soil bacteria that are then used by plants and animals. The process of nitrogen fixation occurs due to an amazing symbiotic relationship between a genus of bacteria called Rhizobium and legumes, bean and pea plants. The bacteria live inside plant roots, where they cause the formation of root nodules. They receive nutrients from the plants, and in return, they fix atmospheric nitrogen into a form that can be used by the plants. So here's the nitrogen cycle. Bacteria in the soil fix atmospheric nitrogen, N2, into either ammonia or ammonium. Other soil bacteria convert that into nitrates, that ammonia, into nitrates or nitrites. The ammonium, the nitrates, and the nitrites are used by producers to make proteins. Consumers then eat those producers and reuse the nitrogen to make their own proteins. When organisms die, decomposers release the nitrogen into the soil and atmosphere via a process known as denitrification, and then the cycle repeats. The phosphorus cycle. Most phosphorus is stored in the form of inorganic phosphates within rock and sediments, shown here, until they eventually wear down and release the phosphate. Phosphate molecules can be washed into rivers, streams, and eventually the ocean, where they're used by marine organisms. You can see the dissolved phosphates here being used by marine plants and animals. Phosphate that remains in the soil is absorbed into plants that convert them into organic compounds useful to living organisms. So you can see that the plants take the phosphate up from the soil, then useful for other living organisms. Phosphorus is a building block for RNA, DNA, and ATP. You can see it shown in the ATP molecule here, right? As adenosine triphosphate requires these three phosphorus. Unlike carbon and nitrogen, phosphorus is not abundant in the atmosphere and is mostly found on land in rocks, soil, and ocean sediment.